Well, how does a cell operate chemically? Well, this is a cell. It's utterly amazing. A cell is a machine. It is a factory. How do you get materials in a factory from point A to point B? You have these overhead automatic scaffolds that pick stuff up and deliver it. This is what a cell is a factory. We understand certain things about the cell, other things we don't. But you know, if it has to transport material from one end of the cell to the other, you know how it does it? It will build a microtubule. It'll construct the microtubule and then transfer the material along the tubule. And then it deconstructs the tubule. You say, well, why doesn't it just leave it there? Because then the cell would become too rigid. You get too many. It just deconstructs it and rebuilds it where it needs to transfer. It's amazing. How does it do this? It's amazing. So I don't understand the vast chemical mechanisms in a cell, but it clearly operates. So it's not improper to ask the question, by what chemical mechanism does it function? The very question spawns further investigation. So generally, scientists are invited to ask questions. So the question often asked of me by students is, what do you think about evolution? Well, on my website is jmtour.com. And then if you go to the corner, there's a personal topics tab. And one of the bullets there is evolution creation. So I've written about this thing. So before we talk about evolution, let's first talk about the origin of life, because you have to have life before you can have evolution. Or how did life arise in the first place? You want to say, well, aliens brought it here. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But let's say origin of first life. Where did the alien life come from? Let's say, what is the origin of first life? And on Earth, life has to have 4 compounds. It has to have carbohydrates, nucleic acids, lipids, and proteins. Those 4 compounds. That's what life is made out of today. That's what you and me are made out of. We're not made out of silicon. We're not made out of tungsten. We're made out of these molecules: carbohydrates, nucleic acids, lipids, and proteins. So I just wrote this article this year on abiogenesis, or prebiotic chemistry, and yeah, that's supposed to be me. I mean, you write these articles for them, and then they I don't know where they get these artists, but they do this to everyone. And you know, I saw it, I was like, whoa. And then my kids saw it. They thought, one of my kids said, you see, there they go again, attacking the Jews. I said, no, they do this. They do this to everyone. Don't worry, just calm down. They do this to everyone who writes an article for them. But I just dissected origin of life. So I asked one of my very famous colleagues, National Academy member, I said, what's the origin of carbohydrates? He said, oh, it comes from formaldehyde in the foremost reaction. I said, okay, and he said, I'll send you an article. So I read the article by a guy named Eschenmoser, a great chemist. I've known of his work for many years. He's in his 90s now. And I just went to the synthetic protocols and I dissected it. So if you look at nature's molecules, so nature uses ribose. This is ribose, these 5 carbon sugars. Why do we want to focus in on ribose? Because the backbone of DNA is a carbohydrate. So you have the carbohydrate strand, and then the nucleic acids are hanging off. So before you can have DNA, you got to have the sugars and the carbohydrates, and you got to have the 5-carbon carbohydrate. So in trying to make this in a prebiotic world, all you can do is mix certain things, but you can't do real sophisticated chemistry because you're only supposed to use the molecules that nature had at the time. Things like formaldehyde, things like ammonia. And so he had to make these pentose sugars, but the pentose sugars have 3 stereogenic centers, which means that you're going to end up with a total of 8 possible isomers. You get these 4 pairs of enantiomers, and then between the pairs of enantiomers, they're diastereomers. So you don't just get one, you get all of them. So what happens is you need these 5 carbon sugars, or you need to have the D-ribose in particular. If it's for DNA, you have to now pull off one of the hydroxyl groups to be deoxyribose, unless you want to start with RNA, which is fine, and then you'd have ribose, but then it's a lot less stable. But the prebiotic system never knows that. So when we want to make something in the lab, we decide the target we want to make, and then we go ahead and make it. The prebiotic system doesn't know what it's going to make. Doesn't know. I think I'll build life today. No, it doesn't know that. There's no brain there in a prebiotic system. So what is the chemistry going toward? It has no target. That's a big problem. Try to make something without going toward it. You don't know what to go toward. It had to do this with all those classes of molecules. It never knew what to go toward. It never knew what to select because it didn't have a selector. It's not biology. Biology has selectors. Living systems have selectors. If it's the right thing, it notices it by this enzyme. If it's the wrong thing, it notices it and it sends another enzyme, chew it up. But this is before there's any enzymes because it's prebiotic. It's pre-biology. It's pre-life. Before you can have life, you got to have the molecules. So that was the first thing. This is there's a number of criteria that nature has to deal with. If you view this totally as a materialistic world, nature has chosen a hard route. It's chosen most of its molecules can be enantiomeric, and it's chosen them as homochiral. So the system has multiple stereogenic centers, and it's chosen homochiral. These are hard compounds to work with. Just trust me, it's very hard to do homochiral synthesis on something with multiple stereogenic centers. You have solubility problems. Try to do organic chemistry in water. That's what a natural system has to do. And you have to design the system so it splays out the hydrophilic portions and puts the hydrophobic portions on the interior. As organic chemists, we just use organic solvents. Nature's got to use just water. When building a molecular nanosystem, like trying to build a functioning cell, you have to do constant redesigns, because it doesn't work. So you go back to the beginning. Redesign often makes you go back to step one in the synthesis. I know this because we build nanomachines. Very few people build molecules all the way up to a nanomachine. Very few people. There's only a handful of us in the world which will start from molecules and go right up to a functioning machine. So it bothers people when I say, I probably know more about this than most people, but let me explain to you why. There's so few people that do it. Even most organic chemists don't try to build a functioning machine from their system. They make a molecule. Hey, look at what I made. But they don't try to put them together to build a functioning system. That's what we do with these molecular cars and these submarines. The cars, by the way, have 4 independently rotating wheels. They have molecular motors. They have axles. They have loading bays, all of these things. But if you want to change something, you got to go back to step one. How did this happen in a prebiotic world when there's no mind there? It doesn't know how to stop. So say it gets to a carbohydrate. How does it know to stop the synthesis? It doesn't know that, there's the target I want. No. You just ruined what you just took 400 million years to make. It doesn't know to stop. Prebiotic system doesn't have just-in-time delivery. I order chemicals, they're at my door in 18 hours. And I keep the intermediate safe and stored in the freezer for the next step. What does nature do? Here in this cave, something formed. The thing it needs to react with is in a cave 80 kilometers away or on another planet. How does it get there? How did it get there? It has to be in a concentration where things can react. If it's just one molecule in a puddle, there's not a concentration gradient where things can react because the two molecules never find each other. It's easy statistics to figure out. You have to have a certain concentration before things can react. People will often say to me, oh, if you wait long enough, it'll form. No, time is your enemy in organic chemistry. Time is your enemy. You make something, you right away store it in a precious place because if air hits it or ammonia hits it, it falls apart. People will often say to me, oh, if you wait long enough, it'll form. No, time is your enemy in organic chemistry. Time is your enemy. You make something, you right away store it in a precious place because if air hits it or ammonia hits it, it falls apart. They're kinetic products. Very often they're the kinetic product, meaning that they form first, but they're not the most stable. The most stable is junk. Reagent addition order is critical. You have to add A, and then B, and then C. You can't just throw it all together. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. Try cooking, an elaborate French dinner. I bought all this stuff. I just add it all together. And chemistry is the same way. You can't do that. How does nature know what to add? How does it add one and then the other and then the other? And when these guys do their prebiotic chemistry, say, look what we got. Yeah, because you added A and then B and then C, and you bought A and you bought B and you bought C. The parameters of temperature, pressure, solvent, light or no light, pH, oxygen, no oxygen, moisture, no moisture, has to be carefully controlled to build complex molecular structures. The characterization at each step is essential, but hard in a prebiotic system. How do you characterize it? Biology characterizes everything. Everything that's made, enzymes check it. And if it's not right, another enzyme comes and rips out that wrong base and fixes it in the DNA. But this is a prebiotic world. You don't have any of this. How do you bring up more starting material from the rear? Anytime you want to make a complex system, you go along and then you run out of starting material because you were trying many things, and then you go back and you make some more, and then you go back and how does nature go back? It just spent 1 billion years building something, and now, I ran out of starting material. Well, just go back and make some more. I would, but I never kept a laboratory notebook. I forgot what I had done 1 billion years ago. You see the problem. How many organic chemists are here? Okay, do you know what I'm talking about? Isn't this true? It just doesn't work. None of this works. And this is what they publish paper on after paper, and it gets into Nature and the science. I'm like, you're crazy. And there's no accounting here. There's no accounting. So one guy makes ribose in a 0.1% yield with all the other carbohydrates in there, and they identify it by mass spec. And then the next researcher starts with ribose. Say, okay, ribose has been made, so we'll start with that. Now, no. Start with the junk that he made. You don't buy ribose with all the chiral centers in place that came from a natural source. None of it works. So critical for life is the origin of information. So this is just making the basic molecules. Now you got the whole information. It's not just the nucleic acids, it's the order in which they're arranged. The information is primary, the matter is secondary. Information is primary. You can write information on a piece of paper, then transfer it to your computer, put it up in the cloud, and now it's in some server form. The matter can change. The information is primary. This is why we believe that in Christ, when we die, we live forever with Him because the information is stored in the cloud. It is. It is retained in the cloud. We are very much with Him. The body can be cremated. The body decomposes. That's just the matter upon which it was stored for that time. And in fact, even the information that's in my brain is changing all the time, the matter. Your body is replaced every 7 years. Every molecule of your body replaces out. So all the molecules are replaced out all the time, constantly replaced. So your matter is changing all the time, but the information is the primary part. You see what I mean? The information, the code. So even if you had all of these molecules, you can't do anything because you don't have the information. So the origin of life, so say we assemble a dream team. I'll give the dream team can't even make the first cell, there's an error, the first living cell if given all the chemicals for the information code. So in other words, the mystery of the origin of life does not permit the opening of the door on a biological evolution. It's difficult to discuss biology without life. You can't start life. So say I assemble a dream team. Say we're not in caves anymore. You're in your best labs in the world, and I get the top 100 synthetic chemists, the top 100 biochemists, the top 100 evolutionary biologists, and the top 100 whatever else you want. And I give them limitless funds, and I give them all the carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins that they want. And I'll even give it to them in the assembled order. All the DNA, all the RNA, I'll give you the information. You tell me the code you want. I'll give it all to you. Now you take those and just make me one cell. The simplest of living organisms, a cell. Make it for me. They'll be like, you're crazy. We can't assemble one of those. They can't. You say, well, what about artificial cell? Artificial cell is you take a piece from one cell and you put it in another cell. You look what I made. It's like if I take the engine, when I used to work on cars a lot as a kid. You take the engine out of one car, you put it in another car. You say, hey, I made that car. Not. You took the engine out of one car, that's what they call, artificial cell. You try to make a cell ab initio. I'll give you all the chemicals. You can't even build it. But in some cave somewhere, It happened. Clueless. If you just Google my name, James Tour, Origin of Life, on YouTube, or just go to YouTube. Just go to YouTube and put James Tour, Origin of Life. I gave a talk at the University of Waterloo for an hour and 15 minutes. It's straight, boom, boom, just fire upon this group, just trying to explain the problems with Origin of Life. And none of my colleagues will say a word. They all act as if they've never seen it. I sent them the URL. I say, what? They don't even look me in the face because they don't want to have to address this, because they know it's a bunch of nonsense. It's nonsense what they're publishing.